Good morning and welcome to this morning's webinar on overcoming the stigma barrier. My name is Daryl Moon and I'll be your host today. This is the second webinar or huddle in our series sponsored by or brought to you by Going on Offense, the movement that we've been running now for the last few months, trying to support those who are struggling with emotional struggles and stress and anxiety associated with the pandemic. This series that we're running this is the second in a series we're running about managing population mental health. And this particular series is being sponsored by Resilience Pro. Now, before I introduce my guest panelists for today, let me give you a little bit of a background behind this series and why we're doing it. About 23 years ago, a couple of very innovative leaders in the mental health space here in Utah came up with a very new and innovative way to manage mental health. They were frustrated with the way managed mental health was happening. It was very restrictive. It was very, let's put up barriers for people getting help. And they envisioned an entirely different way where you could actually save money by doing more. So instead of trying to save money by doing less, the whole concept was let's push prevention. Let's open the gates, let's invite people in to get help. Let's make it easy to get help. Let's get people in quickly. Let's not manage to a benefit, let's manage to the person's illness. And by really opening the gates and providing support, we have found that you spend less by providing more. And so we've decided now that mental health has become a fairly significant crisis across the country, and particularly during this pandemic, we thought it would be a good idea to share what we might call best practices or lessons learned or the secrets we've learned, where the only way we've been able to make money is not a typical insurance environment where you just keep raising the price every year, but the way we've made money is by keeping costs low. And we can keep those costs low by really focusing on prevention. So today we're going to talk about one of those lessons learned, and that is how do you overcome the stigma of mental health? Now, everyone knows that there's probably nothing more significant as a barrier than just the stigma associated with mental health. On average, people wait 10 years after experiencing mental health symptoms before they'll reach out and get help. And 57% of people who have mental health conditions never reach out for help, never even get the help that they need. And that's a significant statistic. If you think about that, there's a lot of people out there who are avoiding support and help because of this stigma. And what we've learned is that, yes, education is wonderful and awareness is wonderful and creating a culture where people feel comfortable and seeking help is wonderful, but you still can't overcome that barrier by just providing awareness and culture and education. It's a very big barrier. What we found is that a health coach plays an incredibly important role in helping people get through that barrier and is one of the best strategies that can be applied. Now, there's no stigma associated with talking to a health coach. And a health coach can build a trusting relationship with people and then be a catalyst to engage them in getting the help that they need, helping them to get over that barrier once they've built that trust. So today I've invited as my guest panelist our health coaching manager here at Orion, Amy Shane. Amy's been both a coach and a manager of our coaching department for well over 10 years. Before I give Amy a chance to introduce herself, let me say that we welcome you, our attendees, to send in questions and comments during the huddle, and we will do our best to respond to them. Amy, would you like to introduce yourself and share just some initial thoughts around this topic of overcoming the stigma barrier and the role that health coach can play?
Definitely. So myself and all of our health coaches have bachelor's degree in health science, and we have an extensive training program on how to help people how to facilitate that behavioral change with everyone. So we're really looking at health as a broad spectrum. But one thing that's really interesting about mental health is that it touches on every single other aspect of wellness and well-being. So with a lot of our health coaches and with a lot of the conversations that we're having with participants, we are finding that yes, we're talking about exercise. Yes, we're talking about a healthier approach to nutrition. But with all of that, because it's all about change and changing our mindset, it also is addressing mental health. So I think this is a really important topic. I'm fascinated by it personally as well. And the idea that we can help people say it's okay to talk about some of our mental blocks. It's okay to ask for help to work through some of those mental health issues.
Awesome. Let me ask the question, are people willing to share their personal struggles and trials with a coach? Is this something that people, based on the relationship, are they willing to open up?
You know what? It's almost somewhat surprisingly, but I would say the overwhelming answer is yes. It could be how we choose to coach, which is primarily telephonic, because there's none of the physical barrier or the physical prejudgments necessarily, or maybe what some people might do as far as a health coach is maybe put them on a pedestal. That is broken down. And so it's surprisingly how quickly a lot of people will start opening up. As I experienced as a coach, as well as when I reached out to my coaches and talked to them about this, they said, sometimes people will just really jump right into it and just start divulging everything, which is really interesting. But then some people, they really do need to form a bit of a relationship with their health coach first. But that's what's really neat as well too, is because we are telephonic based, but we really emphasize having a relationship as the foundation of everything. So all of our coaches are working, very first thing they're trying to do is establish a relationship, is to create trust within that relationship. So if the person isn't upfront about some of those struggles, that is the primary goal for the coach, to initially establish an environment and a relationship that can happen.
And how does a coach go about building that rapport and that trust? What are some of the techniques that coaches use to build that trust?
Great answer, or great question. So I think a big thing, so from my perspective as the hiring manager for our coaches, is some of the key characteristics and the quality and the personality types I'm looking for in our health coaches is that they're amiable, they're friendly, and they're easy conversationalists. So they're that type of person that you want to talk to, first of all. So that's helpful. But then also a lot of our coaches are trained in a primary skill that's called motivational interviewing. And motivational interviewing is the whole idea is that it is an approach that is really all about eliciting behavioral change to help somebody move from a state where they are feeling indecisive or uncertain about something, to get them to find that motivation of what they need and what they want to do in order to start moving forward with that goal. So again, that's the big thing that coaches are trying to do. One thing that I think is also interesting too is that, and this is another thing that we stress as well, is I want our health coaches to come with their own personality type. So we've got coaches who are very outgoing. We've got coaches that are more introverted. We've got coaches that are funny. We've got coaches that will back up with education, all these different things. I want them to come with their own personality to the conversation, so it feels like it's an authentic relationship. But at the same time, I think it's a powerful skill that our coaches have to be a bit of a chameleon and to be able to meet the need of the person that they're working with, and to create, okay, what is it that you need from me? Do you need me to maybe do most of the talking? Do you need me to ask most of the questions and give you lots of time to find out what your answer is? What is it that you need from me? So that friendly, amiable personality type, but then also kind of that chameleon ability to facilitate motivational interviewing.
How important is to be authentic? How important is it for the coach to open up and share a little bit about themselves?
That's something I think is a powerful skill. So as we talk about different tools in our toolbox for coaches, it's a skill and it's called self-disclosure. So it's that ability to say, I've gone through something similar. I'm not trying to top what you're doing. I'm not trying to say mine was harder or better or anything, but it's an an ability to create that empathy of saying that's what we're doing. And that's actually, when you brought this subject up, it's something I thought about from my coaching days. I'll call this participant that I worked with named Stan. And when Stan and I began working together, turns out, I mean, he was a 60-year-old gentleman. I was a 20-year-old female, but we were both in the same role of caregiving for a dying parent. And so it was a powerful experience for us, and it was kind of crazy in the sense that we were both caregiving, and then we both went through the death of our parent, and then we went through the grieving process afterward in a very, very similar timeline. So it was a powerful experience for us to create that empathy, and for me to self-disclose my experience with him. And we actually, it was a really neat give and take. We were able to really help each other through that process. And so that's how I remember that experience still nearly 10 years later.
Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
Tell me, do most people, does it take a little while in most cases? I know some people will open up right away, but on average, how long do you think it takes? How many phone calls? How quickly are people willing to really start opening up with what's inside? You know, because often people want to be superficial, but what we're trying to do is get them to find what really causes their own frustrations. But how long does it take generally for a coach to be able to reach that level of trust and reach that level of, I'm really now kind of being genuine?
I wish I had a solid answer for that, but unfortunately, it is very dependent on the individual. I think it's also, interestingly, very dependent on the circumstances as well.
Sure.
So, and interesting that we found over the last few months going through this pandemic is that, as the coaches talked about it, they thought, maybe I'm bringing up mental health issues maybe 1 in every 3 phone calls. That's what they gave me as a rough estimate, is about a third of our people, we are touching base on some area of mental health. But with the pandemic, they said it's well over 50% of their phone calls because of the
Interesting.
stress of the environment, of just the climate we're in, in these trying times and these
Yeah.
unprecedented times. That stress is impacting everything else in their lives, and it's changing everything. So our coaches are definitely finding that more often than not, they are talking about some type of mental health issues these days.
Well, and that reminds me, last week when we had Dr. Mark Tomasulo on as our guest panelist, he brought that up. The pandemic has created a level of stress and anxiety and anxiousness on everyone's part that it's actually a little more comfortable now to talk about it. People are more willing to open up about mental health symptoms and discuss their fears and struggles because everyone's in the middle of it. I think there's been some value in the fact that this is a worldwide thing that we're all going through and we're all feeling this, and the ability to open up about that, which is a good thing. And the more that we can capitalize on that and actually engage people in getting the help, whether it's through a mental health professional or whether it's through a coach or whether it's through a friend or some kind of a support team. Again, the key is to not let people wait 10 years. That's a long time, and there's way too many people who are just not getting help. So hopefully the atmosphere of it's okay to talk about it is a good thing, and people will be more open.
Well,
Let
I
me
agree
ask
with
you.
you. I'll just say one thing. I agree with you that
Sure.
I think we'll always capitalize on a catalyst. For those of us who are in the field of that we want to help others, we'll capitalize on that catalyst. We know that trends of just the yearly trends, New Year's resolutions, we'll capitalize on that.
Mhm.
Summer swimming suit body, we'll capitalize on that.
Right.
So in that sense, yeah, I might agree with you. Excuse me, that the pandemic has been a bit of a catalyst for allowing people to say it's okay to talk about things that are hard.
So I have a question that has been sent in. After building the relationship or trust and seeing that a person can benefit, perhaps by working with a mental health professional, how hard is it for a coach to broach that topic, to actually bring up the topic of encouraging someone to seek help? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. My first response to that is our coaches are already trained to, maybe go there with people, is to have that difficult conversation and to invite someone to think a little bit in an uncomfortable space, in the
Mhm.
sense that they're saying, hey, what you've been doing has created a lifestyle or a health habit such that it's something that you can see an area for improvement. So I'm going to invite you to go to an uncomfortable space so that you can make a change within your life. So honestly, when it comes to mental health, I would say as a general idea is that our health coaches are ready, trained, and willing to already go there with somebody and say, all right, this might be uncomfortable, but that's part of change, is that sometimes it's uncomfortable in order to get there first. I would also say that one of the most powerful things of being a health coach, skills, characteristics, yet again, I've said a lot of them already, but one of them is listening, is
Mhm.
that a coach is invested in you in the sense that that's the only reason why you have a relationship, right? Is so that they can help you. So their ability to actively listen, to authentically listen, and to listen fully will really change that relationship in a lot of ways. I think they are willing and they're invested in that. And so that can also allow a really safe space for maybe some uncomfortable conversations.
Nice. Let me remind the attendees that we welcome their questions. Another question is, what do coaches get to know whether or not people follow through? And what are some of the steps that coaches help people go through if in fact they're encouraging them to go see their employee assistance program counselor, or they're encouraging someone to go talk to their primary care physician about the depression they may be experiencing, or whether they're encouraging someone to go see a mental health counselor? What are some of the barriers that come up, and what are what's the likelihood that people will follow through? And do coaches really get to know that?
I think that's an interesting one in the sense that on one hand, most definitely coaches get to be a part of that process. If people go and they are seeing change and they are working through some heavy items with their counselor, in the sense that the coach is going to see that across the board with every other aspect of that participant's life. Let's say they've been struggling and struggling for months and months to start exercising. And now all of a
Mhm.
sudden, because they're talking to a counselor about mental health issues with maybe some of their family stressors, if they're able to work through some of that, then their capacity to finally work on the exercise element of their life increases because they take away some of those additional mental health stressors, that type of thing. So in that sense, I think, yes, a coach is definitely well suited to be that partner in their journey because they get to see the positive benefits. There was a few of our coaches that said, you know what, unfortunately, I recommend it and I do it, but I'm still fighting that stigma barrier. So that's definitely still is out there, but they'll continue talking to their health coach. Their coach knows that, you've got some deeper stuff to work on. And I'm going to still continue to encourage you to go to the next level of professional outside of our relationship. So, I kind of have, again, mixed answers in that sense.
Yeah. Well, it just brings up that this barrier we're talking about today is significant. There's no question it's a major issue, and it keeps people from getting the help they need. And like you said, even with the encouragement of a coach, sometimes the person just doesn't want to get through that. But let's talk a little bit about the fact that, regardless of what the person's working on, and it could be stress, it may not be some of those deep-seated mental health issues, but it could just be some stress, anxiety. It all boils down to that battle that goes on inside of all of us, where there's the amygdala, that elephant in the room that we can't think
Come on,
through. It's
you can
not a
say
conscious.
lizard
It
brain.
just,
I'm ready for it.
the reptilian brain, that's right. It just doesn't want to change. And as much as our conscious brain says change, it just doesn't like to change. And so really, whether it's a counselor or a coach, it's all about helping the person work through that change that the amygdala needs to change. And those same principles of starting small, not trying to eat the entire elephant at once, but really providing small, easy steps. So regardless of whether it's a mental health professional or a coach, having success in working through small improvements of changing where the amygdala doesn't want to change, but making those changes successful is a direction in the positive way.
I completely agree with you. And actually, thinking of this subject, that was the other individual that I remembered working with as a health coach, and I'll call him Ron. Ron and I worked together for months, and we instantly had a really fun relationship with one another. As far as it was great, he opened up about his work, about his family. When I started going into that uncomfortable space about saying, all right, let's address your exercise, it always got very, very awkward. It took us, and I was trying to think back of the timeline, so I'm going to roughly estimate, but I think it took us 6 months for him to take the Christmas. I just always remember this. He stored all of his Christmas wrapping paper on his treadmill. So it took 6 months of this fun relationship and then an awkward moment at the end of me saying, all right, well, anytime you want to clear out that treadmill, that's going to be our first step, Ron. He finally cleared off that Christmas wrapping paper. It took another 3 months for him to actually step onto the treadmill. So, I mean, that is a 9 months of what some people might think, oh, all you had to do is step on a treadmill, man. Let's take things off and step on the treadmill. But because of those barriers that we were working through. So I think for some people, it's patience, it's
Mhm.
persistence. And that's what's a really neat thing about having a relationship with a health coach, in the sense that your entire relationship is dedicated on helping them see that change, and that coach is going to hold you accountable to that change no matter how long it takes you, in the sense. So it took Ron and I 9 months for him to get on the treadmill. So a year later, then we started talking about nutrition, because he was able to now, okay, get on the treadmill with some type of regularity. And then we were able to start talking about nutrition. And when we went there, it was actually fascinating, because it turns out he had a very negative relationship with food because of his past. So we slipped right into that mental health realm, right? In the sense of, okay, let's work through what that is so that we can figure out how to overcome that barrier as an adult and as somebody who does want to make some change.
Well, and that's a great story to emphasize how even small steps are extremely hard to take, but continuing to work on them and just really breaking them down into the smallest and tiniest of steps, it's what it takes to move the elephant. Sometimes,
Yeah,
that wrapping paper was not going to get moved. That elephant didn't want that wrapping paper to
yeah.
be moved, and it took
Physically,
a lot.
physically that was a 30-second job, but
Right.
emotionally and mentally, it was a 6-month job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it just emphasizes how incredibly important it is to break it down into small steps and to recognize that this is a battle that people are experiencing internally. And you can't just give someone a shot. You can't just give someone a drug, and you can't just give someone a prescription to change. It takes more than that. It takes a lot of effort. And I think helping people realize that you don't have to be diagnosed as mentally ill. We all struggle with this. There's not anybody that doesn't struggle with change. And so it's okay. And that's where some of the education and awareness and culture come in, is to normalize the fact that we all struggle and we're all battling that amygdala inside. And it doesn't matter whether it's relationships that we're struggling with, or whether it's exercise and nutrition, or whether it's job satisfaction, or whether it's the way we deal with finances. It could be just changing our environment. There's so many aspects of well-being, and each one sometimes take a lot of work to make change, because our amygdala gets in a rut and it likes to stay there. And we
Mhm.
just don't want to move that. I'm going to encourage again one more time, if anyone has any questions. We've gotten to about 25 minutes in our presentation. We're going to close things up in a few minutes. If anybody has any questions about this stigma barrier or comments they'd like to make, would encourage people to do that. Amy, are there any last minute thoughts that you want to share, or that coaches have shared with you, that we could bring up today?
Yeah, I was thinking about this and I was applying this to myself. So I have also gone through some mental health adventures, and have sought the help of a counselor through different things. And then I was also thinking about it with our coaches. And I think one aspect of this is I would empower individuals to find out how they learn, or what it is they value in how they learn. So in those two senses, I will just use myself as the example, is I value a relationship and somebody I can emotionally connect with. So I actually had to go through a few counselors before I found somebody that I felt comfortable with going on that journey with me. And I think that's a major part of it. So even with health coaching as well too, is that you have to have the right kind of relationship and the right kind of environment to go through these kind of maybe scary places, right? And to go on those journeys. So I think that is a major part of things, is to find the counselor that works for you, find the coach that works for you, find the learning style that works for you too. I'm, again, myself as an example, I'm a major visual person. So you give me a picture to color or a graph to look at and I will learn it instantly. You give me articles to read and research to do and I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So I think if we learn that about ourselves, then it sets us up for a greater chance to succeed, is to find out what it is that we need and maybe how it is that we need that.
And I think that's very important. I'm glad you brought that up about finding the right person. We were having an interesting conversation with my family the other day about different personalities and how well they connect. And the difference between an empathetic person and a sympathetic person. I'd never even explored those differences, and yet there's an
Oh,
incredibly big difference
welcome to
between,
coach training, Daryl.
yeah, the sympathetic person that says, yeah, I think I understand where you are and here's where you need to go, versus I'm just going to cry with you. You know, I'm going to be empathetic. I'm not going to tell you where you need to go. I'm just going to feel the misery with you. And sometimes that's what some people need, is they just need to know that somebody's willing to experience that misery with them, connect with them, and then they'll move on. Where sometimes an empathetic and a sympathetic, they clash. It's like, just move on. It's like,
Yep.
I'm not ready to move on.
Yep. And a lot of that, I've termed that a lot of like the logical thinker as well. So I'm going to use you as the example, Daryl. I think you're the logical thinker. You don't want me sitting there crying with you. You want me giving you a list of all the reasons of why you should get over this and how we can get over it. So it's very, very
My
important
family
to know
said the
that about
same thing to me about that. So you're right.
Nice.
I would agree. And I have members of my family that are like me, and I have members of my family that are not like me. And so we had a great conversation about the differences and how we all have to recognize that there are differences.
Yep, definitely.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank Amy for her contribution today. I want to thank all of those that have listened. We're coming to the end of our 30-minute webinar now. I do want to mention again that Resilience Pro is the program that Orion is currently launching that is sponsoring these webinars, this series of managing population mental health. And I would encourage you to download the handout that's available through the webinar right now, and we'll be sending that out to people. It's just a description of what Resilience Pro is, and basically it's a way to really monitor and identify early those within the population that are struggling, so that instead of waiting 10 years, we can engage people in the support that they need, and do that through someone that doesn't have a stigma, a health coach, someone that there is no stigma associated with a health coach. And we found that there's a tremendous power and efficacy of using a coach to engage people in becoming or being involved in getting the support that they need. So with that, we thank you for participating. Please join us next week. This is a series. We'll be doing this for a number of weeks, talking about, as we've managed population mental health, what are the secrets we've found that are most successful at really opening the doors and giving people help and getting people in early, and how, in essence, you can save money and give people a lot more services if you, instead of restricting care, you open up the gates and you push prevention. With that, we'll sign off and ask everyone to have a great day, and we'll see you back next week. Take care and have a good day.